Welcome to the Modern Prospecting Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Yee. My guest today is Steve Richard. He is the SVP of Revenue at Enablement for Mediafly, but he's also a sales development guru, conference speaker, and a sales trainer with over 20 years of experience. Welcome, Steve. Give us a little background on your career, what you do for Mediafly, maybe a little bit about your sales training consultancy.
Yeah. You and I met many years ago when you were at
Yeah.
Eloqua, and I was working with the SDR team. Remember that?
Yep.
That was a long time ago. Yeah. So Steve Richard, I founded and sold a couple of companies in the sales world. The first one was called Outsourced Appointment Setting, outsource SDRs, BDRs for hire type of a thing. So in 16 years, Andre, from 2005 to 2021, we had 453 SDRs. Who's counting Salesforce licenses? They were counting when we shut it down. I got the number. And then I also founded and exited a company called Exec Vision in conversational intelligence for coaching SDRs. And here I am at Mediafly after that.
Fantastic. And you do sales training even at Mediafly?
Yeah, and also with clients as well. So both with internally in the company and then externally with various clients worldwide.
Cool. Well, I want to jump right into it. And here's where I want to start. About 18 months ago, when I was thinking about doing TIGA, we were just starting the journey, I had a conversation with you where I said to you, the SDR is a job no one really wants. Now, when I said that, I thought you would be really upset. Because, that's what you built your career around. And I was kind of surprised, to be honest, that you agreed with me. And I think you said something like, yeah, the SDR role as it's defined today, as it's practiced today, isn't what sales development is about. If I recall rightly, it was something like that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but can you elaborate on what you meant by that? And also what's the state of sales development today and what went wrong?
It has changed so much. Okay. So I got into this accidentally in 2002 because I couldn't get a job as an investment banker and I was working at corporate executive board in DC. There was a sales floor of 100 SDRs, but then we were called marketing associates. We didn't know any different. And we didn't market anything. We were cold calling, cold emailing and before the days of LinkedIn and social media. So that wasn't even on the table. And from that experience, you start and you're running these experiments and this A/B testing for what's working and what doesn't. If you looked at the A/B tests we were doing then compared to what we're doing here in 2025, that's 23 years later. It's changed. I would argue more than almost any other profession. And part of the reason why is the explosion of people doing those jobs because of all the venture money that was flowing in for so long, especially into SaaS and now into other areas. And then you also have the explosion of the technologies associated with it, with the basics of like the sales loft, cadence, outreach sequence. And now you've got Apollo and HubSpot, like lots of other sequencing and cadencing technologies that are out there. But what happened was along the way, those started being used as spam cannons. And
we all know about that.
The unintended consequences. And this is why your business exists, TIGA, right?
Yeah.
I know the founders of Outreach and Sales Loft, and if you went to either one of them, Manny or Kyle, and said, hey, did you ever intend for your technology to be used this way? They were going to be like, no, but that's what happened. It kind of unleashed this new wave of our prospects tuning out in waves that they've never done before. Which changed how people would approach it. And then as a result, your A/B tests yield different results. Like for many years, in-mails were very effective and now they're not effective at all. Usually, I mean, with a very few exceptions to that rule, you can run a test of an in-mail versus a high quality email with the same message. Email is going to do a lot better. So going back to the point of the question, to answer it, the job as it stands today requires a different type of person than the job that it stood many years ago. The person who gets into SDR or BDR or entry-level sales, and they do it because they like talking to people, is probably not going to make it. As opposed to you're going to have the combination of being more analytical, being able to leverage AI capabilities, being able to learn about people in a scalable way so that you can do it repeatedly day in, day out, week in, week out. That's going to require a thoughtfulness that, the average quote unquote dumb jock that got into sales probably doesn't have, or they're going to have to pick it up along the way. So it's evolved the profession. It's
Mm,
evolved what it looks like to have success in prospecting and the kinds of people who will. So I guess what I should have said is some people will love it still, but the kinds of people historically that would have loved it in 2005 when I started Vorsight, probably not the ones that would love it now.
good. It's a good point. And, just from the outside, I would say it just feels like it's harder than ever to prospect effectively. It just, everywhere I go, I talk to go-to-market leaders. That's the sense I get. So, like, when you think about it, how has prospecting changed, especially in the last, say, 5 to 7 years? What's really changed? The essence of, like, you mentioned one of the things, like just the use of these, tools like Salesloft and Outreach as kind of spam cannons. But are there prospecting tactics that used to work, they just don't work anymore? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that because of the volume of what people are getting every day. And oh, by the way, you also have all of the the explosion of people who are calling you scammers. You've got all these scammers and things like
Mm,
that, which changes the game. And you got things like stir shaken with, your calls that you're getting that your calls might be going to people's spam on their phone versus not spam, and how that's routed through stir shaken, which is an FCC standard, or Federal Communication Commission standard. So going back to it with, with what's changed is, people don't hate being prospected. So, generally speaking, you hear it like, oh, I hate the cold callers. I hate the telemarketers.
mm,
Everybody hates the telemarketers universally. Everyone hates the email spammers. Everyone hates the LinkedIn. That's universal.
hmm
At the same time, everyone appreciates, or the majority of people appreciate good prospecting. And you've got these people who say they will never respond to any kind of cold outreach whatsoever. And then you get a very good SDR that connects a few dots, leveraging maybe like a tool like a Tiga, and leverages a common connection, uses some sort of a compelling offer as bait on the end of the hook for the prospect, and can reference somebody that's similar to the prospect. All of a sudden, that's welcome, but people don't look at that as cold prospecting.
mm,
What it is, right? Like
mm, mm,
originally it was a name on a list, but a really clever SDR was able to connect these dots and craft this compelling, not just message, but offer, and do the 3x3 research, which we'll come to here, on to learn something about this individual at this company or this department. So it's 3 points on the company, the contact, or the department, and 3 minutes of research. And then all of a sudden the experience for the person receiving that becomes completely the opposite of if it's a cold caller or some, dumb list, even
mm.
though it's started on a list. So I think that's the thing that's changed, is that the execution of really great prospecting can create lifelong friendships. Bob Perkins at the AISP, the Inside Sales Association, that's now called Blaze. The reason that he and I are so close to this day is because of a cold call that one of my guys made, where we
Really?
connected all those dots together. Right. I mean, literally, long lasting business relationships. But again, if you go back to those people and say, how did you ever meet this person in the first place? They would probably not say they cold called me, they cold
Mm,
called me,
mm.
cold emailed me, they cold LinkedIn me. They wouldn't even know that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Does the channel matter at all? Because there's a sense, I think, that what I get, and there's just the sentiment I sense is that email is a diminishing channel, and then you get a lot of conflicting, no, not conflicting, but just you get a lot of these phrases people throw around. Some people say, email is dead; it's a diminishing channel. You hear other people say, those people generally say you have to pick up the phone, and then you hear people that say, well, no one picks up the phone anymore. And then no one answers their phone. Does the channel matter? Are there channels like email? What's your belief in terms of, or what you've seen, more importantly, in terms of the effectiveness of email or the effectiveness of actual calling? What are your thoughts on that?
It depends on what you sell and who you sell to.
Mm.
Okay, so this is the first thing that's the most important. I am so tired of hearing these supposed experts and they don't take this into account, because if they're not taking this into account, they're not working with a variety of companies that
Yeah.
are selling different things to different people in a variety of industries. Okay. So if you're AWS and you're going to try to get meetings with the founder CEOs of startups, there's a better chance that you're going to be able to get connected and interact with those people via, their GitHub, via potentially, if you get their mobile number, a text, via, if they're video game people, Twitch,
Mm.
all Discord. Like you got to, it's like where the people hang out and what they do. Now, when you go and get in touch with them, you don't want to be some act weird, some bizarro freak. And you and I have been at these various networking events in the DC area or other places. And there was like that one commercial real estate broker that just goes way over the top and it's too far. And it's everyone's
Yeah.
kind of like, oh yeah, I'll call you.
Uh-huh.
I'll be in touch. And you're just like, just chill out. So you also have to, act appropriately. You have to go where the fish are. And then when you're where the fish are, you act appropriately for where those fish are. So you're in line with the decorum of that environment. And then you have to have some kind of a compelling offer. Now, this is an interesting, the advent of this, Andre, is like the personalization at scale that you're trying to do with Tiga here. And it's, I mean, I'm seeing it, it's phenomenal, right? All of that, all those pieces that's now kind of the price of admission. That's the ante at the poker table. I hate saying the word table stakes. I just say the ante at the poker table. But the now it's, well, what can we tell them about one of their peers that they don't know? What can we offer them or provide them that's going to cause the seesaw in the prospect brain to flip like this? So I want to create value for the meeting greater than the time it takes. Because in the prospect's mind, they've got the seesaw, the value versus the time. And if the value that they perceive they're going to get from the meeting is greater than the time, they take the meeting. And if it's not, they don't. And the thing that's amazing is I've heard, so many thousands of cold calls over the years, and you can literally hear that moment where it flips. All of a sudden the SDR or BDR has that, the value of the meeting equation goes like that. This famous call that we had for one of our clients back in the day was Marketo. And this woman goes, take me off your list. And this guy, Mark, says, before I do, I'm looking at your website. I saw you're running all these Google trackers, and these Google trackers are going to be changing. And I thought you might want to know about that. And then there's this long pause and she goes, okay, I'll take that meeting. And the reason that happens is now the value of the meeting is greater than the time it takes. Her brain's moved into system 2.
Yeah.
And she's paying attention. But going back to your question about the communication channel, the problem that we have is that as opposed to what we should be doing, SDRs and BDRs, what we should be doing is we should be leveraging different channels to figure out the combination that works right for that particular prospect. Social media marketers, for example, that is one group of people that very unlikely they're going to answer their phone. You can get them on the phone, but we're talking 80 dials to get a connect. But if we're talking about going after sales leaders, we're looking at more of like a 25 dial.
Yeah, they do pick up the phone. Sales leaders pick up the.
And exactly. And it's different. And the other thing too is it's not always what you expect. So unless we're actually going out there and running the experiments and measuring what's happening from those experiments, you mentioned email in the beginning. So if you have a very well crafted, what I call tub email, and shout out to my old colleague, Ted Martin, for coining the term, them, say something about them, then us, them both together, preferably with that offer I had mentioned before. And, I was doing this with Antigua. It's phenomenal. The them, if we have common connections, if we have a common investor, if they've changed jobs, if they used to work with a customer, I mean, there's so many things. They're of course, the signals like, that they've blogged or there's something happening in the business. There's so many great things about that. If you have a well-crafted tub email, depending on the personas, you can actually get really good success. Where email is dead is just the pure spamming and looking for a meeting, and that's what we saw for quite a few years in the early days of the sales lofts and outreaches. Let's call it the 2014, 2015 range, maybe even earlier, maybe 2012. you could kind of get away with that then.
Yeah.
But when too many people do it, if
Yeah.
everyone's you got to zag and do
Yeah.
something different.
I felt like after the pandemic, that whole approach was done. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And actually what led me to start Tiga. But, you know, yeah, I think, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. You've already said it a couple of times, this idea of A/B testing, and I don't think that SDRs and those of us who prospect think about that enough. It's almost like we want the simple answer. We want to just like, I'm going to do this. I hope it works. And if it doesn't work, we get discouraged or we get. And you've said this a few times. You alluded to it being, being analytical. That's what an SDR really needs you have to have that analytical side of your brain, the A/B testing. I think you're bringing up, this point about experimentation. Thoughtful experimentation is really part of prospecting. You have to accept it as part of prospecting.
Yeah, and it can. There are going to be things that are going to not matter that we all obsess about,
Mm-hmm.
and not really move the needle much. And I'll give you an example of one of those, and I'll do the opposite. Example of one of those is going to be like day of week, time of day. When
Right.
and what day of week and what time of the day should I do emails, for example?
Yeah.
I have seen that is such like a voodoo science that everyone thinks that they have a new opinion about. And the truth of the matter is, I've seen enough clients data at this point to say, if it makes a difference, it's such a small percentage. It just doesn't matter. Like, that's not what we should focus on. Now, funny enough, for calling, it can actually make a big difference. You'll look at dial to connect rates at based on day of week and time of day, and there can be some big swings up to like, 300%. Like,
Yes.
you're 3 times more likely to get someone on the phone during this time block than that time block. That could be very relevant. I mentioned one before where I said InMail is dead. I've posted about this on LinkedIn multiple times. RIP InMail. I had a client prove me wrong the other day. Now, the way they're using InMail is very unique. It's not something I had ever thought of before, but what they're using InMail for is at the end of a, multi-step sequence flow cadence, and they send it coming from the manager or the sales leader apologizing to the prospect that they have this rep that's been blowing them up, and, hey, I'm so sorry, my rep's been blowing you up. I'm happy to serve as a resource for you. We've got some of these content resources. They list a couple things. Thought some of this might be helpful. Sorry.
Yeah.
Remarkably, they get a pretty good response rate to that. So the whole point of this is that, like, different things will potentially work in different ways for different people.
Yeah.
If we can be creative.
Yeah.
And then if we do just some basics of, and I'll tell you going back to the A/B testing and why it hasn't taken root. I think most people don't have the patience to do
that. That was my point. I think that,
yeah, they don't. But Andre, here's the thing. If you're on a team of 10, and if each of you committed to doing 30 in 1 week, how hard is it to do 30 of something?
Yeah, no, I think you're even making me realize like that it's essential, right? Like that's the ticket. I think we all want a shortcut. We want to just pick up some tip on LinkedIn and then like suddenly leads come flowing in. But what you're saying is, look, you're going to have to experiment on the channel. You're going to have to experiment on your message. You're going to have to experiment on your cadence, right? On maybe even the ICP, you're going to have to try different things, right? So, let's switch gears a little bit. You've trained and developed thousands of SDRs in your career. I mean, you've certainly served as a mentor to thousands of SDRs. What are the characteristics of being a great SDR? Like what makes for a great SDR?
I used to have 4 things we'd look for in the interview process, and all of them you can't teach. So, we just look for the intellectual curiosity. We're looking to people prepare that kind of stuff. We're looking for, are they a hard worker? You also see that part in the preparation. We're looking for that drive, that fire in the belly. Are they enthusiastic about something, or are they sort of living their life in this kind of just boring, monotone way, which is generally not going to be as effective? Smart, hardworking, intellectually curious, and now I'm trying to forget I'm going to replace the last one. Now I'm starting to look for people who are going to be a little bit more analytical and be able to be systems thinkers. I'm going to call it systems thinkers. People who have trouble, for example, logging into a new tool they've never used before, using their Google login with an OAuth, or using, password managers. I know those things sound so simple, but it's remarkable how many people, even young people these days, are not nearly as nimble with systems.
Yeah.
And you have to be now for this job. You have to be able to manage, 20 tabs on Google Chrome concurrently and be able to organize that workflow. So I'm going to throw that on the list.
Yeah. Thanks. That's really helpful. And how do you this is a follow-up question. How do you test for that? You said when I interview that, I think that, let's say I agree with you. Fantastic. Now I'm interviewing, actually I'm interviewing for SDRs. How do you test for that in an interview process?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of tricks of the trade that we did that used to work really well. We had this figured out to down to a science. So we have them prep, in this case, it was a client, but it could be prep based on just looking at your website to prepare to write a cold email and do a cold call. And when they came in, they had to put them in a room, and they would, as part of the process, they were going to write a cold email to a prospect there. We're not looking for much. We're just looking for the fact that they can write. And we used to do a writing sample, but what we started to realize is that their parents were doing the writing samples for them. Mom did the writing sample. So the expectation is you're going to draft an email between 75 and 125 words based on what you've learned. Should be pretty straightforward. Can you write? Can you synthesize information? And then the other one, this is the one that it was a little bit of a trip up, is the mock call. Everyone does the mock call. Very normal to do a mock call. When you do it, you want to have one person, and so your interviewing manager over here and the rep here, they're not seeing each other. They call, and the calls always suck. To be real clear, so we are listening to hear if they prepared, but we know it's not going to be very good. After that, you get together with the rep in that room. Go, hey, that was awesome, good job. Hey, next time I'd like you to do this, and you give them literally one piece of feedback, and then you go back away. And then you do the mock call again. And the second time, all you're looking to hear is, did they implement that one? The
thing that you told them.
Is there? Oh, that was my fourth, was coachability.
Oh, coachability.
Now I've got fit.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, now I've got five. So, but that's a way to test for coachability, because Andre, it was binary. They did it or they didn't. It was amazing to see. You could hear the difference. Here are the people who could not incorporate the feedback at all. It's like they didn't even hear it. And if they're not coachable for giving them one simple thing to do that they didn't do, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And then the final one, now this one was real sneaky, is at the end of the last interview, they'd meet my business partner. He was our CEO, and he'd kind of intimidate them and just go in their office. And at that point, it's like, okay, the interview is done. Now it's time to shadow. So everyone lets their guard down. And when they let their guard down and they start shadowing, now their true colors come out. And many times the person who was shadowed would come into the manager's room when they were doing the debrief and say, don't hire them. And the manager's like, what? They're amazing. We have to have them. They're like, no. When I was sitting with them, they told me that they're only going to be doing this job for 3 months. They applied for something overseas. It looks like they're going to get accepted. And you're like, what? So it's amazing when people sitting with a peer, say stuff, or they'll sometimes the peer would go oh, they were looking at their phone the whole time.
They were distracted. They weren't paying attention, that kind of thing. Yeah.
They don't want your job. They want a job. That's the biggest enemy, because the SDR job, let's be honest, it's a job that a lot of people find themselves in when they can't get something else.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That right off the bat is helping me. This has been great. Okay. So if there's an SDR listening right now, what are 2 or 3 practical tips that they can implement right away to make themselves better at prospecting? I'm sure you have lots of it, but what's your top 3?
I'm going to give you 3 quick ones. One is the use of AI, and certainly be looking at Tiga for sure. If you don't have a budget, you can try to hack this together with Perplexity and ChatGPT, but get good at prompts. Get good at prompting in such a way that it's going to give you the information you need, so you are armed and ready to rock and roll when you have that precious interaction with that prospect. That's one. I'd say 2 is is the testing of the channels we had mentioned before is going to be really important. And I want you to really think broadly. Like a final example on this is sending a Loom video or a bomb vent video or a Vidyard video message versus doing it as a after you connect on LinkedIn. So connect on LinkedIn first and then send a video. For example, what we've seen with our testing is that the LinkedIn video performs better than the others, probably because people are now trained, don't click on unknown links, but we don't really know for sure. So my point is do some testing and experimentation. Your sample size doesn't have to be big. 100, 200 is going to be enough to be able to say, how many meetings did I get from A? How many meetings did I get from B? Well, shoot, stop doing A and start doing more B. And then the third thing is you're going to be a little surprised is I want you to go back to the people in your company, the senior executives, sales leaders, marketing leaders, whomever. And I want you to figure out what's the compelling offer? What's the bait I can put on the end of the hook for the fish? What's something that this audience will respond to? So for example, we're having a lot of success at Mediafly with these regional events that we're holding. And we're finding that our particular ICP persona people, they're in manufacturing, they're in sales and marketing roles in manufacturing. They are in-person people. They gravitate towards, there's an event in Houston and Nashville where they can go meet with their peers and do an experiential thing like pizza making or whiskey tasting or something like that. So find out if there's something like that you can do that's very, very easy on the budget. You don't have to spend a lot of money. And then you can execute the stages around it. I read a post on LinkedIn about that guy, Mark Cosaclo from Outreach, about the top salesperson he knows, and they are very good at creating demand. So part of your job now is going to be thinking creatively on how can I create demand? How can I have that seesaw in the brain of the prospect go, well, all of a sudden the value is greater than the time.
Yeah. Awesome. The thing you didn't say, which I swore I thought you would definitely say, is the 3x3.
Well, hold on. The 3x3 is within the prompts. And now, like I mentioned before,
maybe can you break down the 3x3 in 30 seconds for the people who
find
may not?
3 points on the company, the contact, or the department in 3 minutes of research. And I did reference doing it in the prompts in like a perplexity, but ultimately this is why TIGA exists. This is why you founded TIGA, because I'm experiencing it myself. It's too easy to get it now, guys. It's too easy to get it. If you can, have the budget for a tool like TIGA, you're going to want to do it. And if ultimately you can't, you can get really, really good at prompts. You're going to be less efficient, but either way, you have to have it. It's too easy to get it.
Yeah. And there's no excuse, basically, is what you're saying. Yeah, exactly. Well, since we, and actually, by the way, I had this question that I wanted to throw in, and if there isn't, I noticed when it comes to books on sales, there are lots of great books on sales methodologies, challenge a sale, but, and a lot of them focus on what happens once you engage the buyer, but there seems to be very few books on prospecting or do any come to mind that you genuinely could recommend?
There are. I'm going to give you a foundational one that people you should read it to understand the history, but I would not recommend doing this anymore. Is Aaron Ross's Predictable Revenue.
Yes.
So
his was the only one.
It kind of got us in trouble a little bit. I mean,
that's why.
Everyone kind of got into that, and then it turned. But if you go back, there are definitely like Jill Conrath selling to big companies has great stuff on calling. Art Sobchak's Smart Calling and others by Art Sobchak are, excellent. People love Jeb Blunt and some of his stuff, Fanatical Prospecting, although in my opinion, his is more kind of like the energy behind it, although he's got a lot of good methods too. So look, they're out there. I know people have asked me at some point to write a book. Like, I don't think that there's anything that pulls together the different pieces for the modern age of 2025 and prospect book.
Yeah, maybe you'll write that. Maybe this is a
point.
Yeah.
By the time I write it, it'll all change. It'll be 2030.
Yeah. Well, we did touch about AI and not just about TIGA, but the broader landscape. What do you see? And you touched on this a little bit, but what do you see as the future of the SDR in the age of AI? Like, will the role be eliminated? Will more organizations move to full cycle selling teams, or will the role still exist but evolve? Does it involve upskilling, or will we just basically continue kind of as is? What are your thoughts?
if the company has a really good quality and quantity of inbound marketing leads, the role could certainly die, and those can be sent right to the sellers.
Mm,
Um, I've seen several of my clients that have like just shed their SDR teams, and guess what they're doing 6 months later?
yeah.
So the pendulum swings one way, it swings back. But the universal truth of salespeople are not particularly good at prospecting, especially when they're going outbound, it's a universal truth. That's not going to change. So
Mm,
I don't anticipate them going away. How they're augmented, how they operate differently, absolutely big time. How they're enabled, and the role that AI plays in things like identification of which accounts they should be working in the first place, and the
mm,
prioritization of that. The old school method of just go pull a list of accounts based on NACE codes, it just doesn't work, and it's not closely aligned with the lookalike approach. Another example of one is the incorporation of the buyer intent, and
mm.
how AIs can help and support that. But again, that's only going to be good. Some of the times it's going to help a lot. Some of the times it's not going to help a lot. So the person that you're going to have in this role is going to be able to have to synthesize this information from these different places. Human beings will be involved in that for, I think, quite a long time to come, unless you're selling like, transactional phone systems or something. But that's
Yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that, out in the market, there are tools out there. One that recently got a lot of attention in a wrong way, 11x, which basically says you don't need SDRs. We are the digital SDR completely. And then there are tools. I would put us in this next category, which is we're here to empower the prospector. We're here to, make you 2x, 3x better than you are today. But it's still human centric. It's still human driven. Do you have an opinion? I know I saw you on LinkedIn say, I don't have an opinion on 11x, but just in general, do you have an opinion on each of the two approaches?
Um, Yeah, my opinion is that I want us to all collectively stop with the stupid, prognostications and the
Hmm.
SDR. Stop with the sound bites, and let's get to the business of actually taking it to a place where most of what this person has to do can be automated,
Yeah.
or we can deploy agentic AI agents to support in this effort and this goal, and that we actually see the success coming from that, and we can see it across several different companies depending on their situations. That's the whole point of agentic AI in the first
Yes,
place,
absolutely.
is to be more flexible as opposed to the code base being so rigid.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact,
So I would rather have us take a slow roll
yeah.
to a point where in 2030, if we did it right, then you could have these, SDRs that are completely surrounded by AI, where they're pulling all the strings and pulling all the levers,
Yeah.
and they produce a lot more pipeline with a lot less human.
Yeah. You never know. I mean, I think it's a ways away. I think I'm of the same opinion as you are, which is at the end of the day, like the reason we start Tiga is we have this passion about making sellers better, helping sellers. That's the goal. Sometimes I'm in a call with someone and they're not jiving with what I'm selling. And I just tell them, I said, look, that's fine. We built this to help selling teams. That's the main goal. And so even for us, we think of ourselves as an AI agent for human-centric selling. Like our goal is not to eliminate the human, it's to make them more productive, make the job more satisfying, because some of the grunt work can be done by the AI. You focus on what you do best, being creative, thinking of new approaches, to coming up with your A/B test plans, those kinds of things, right? So, well, Steve, thank you. It's been fantastic. I'm gonna ahead of time just say I've got to have you back sometime downstream. You've got so much to share. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights. If someone wants to connect with you and learn more about your, your sales consulting practice, or just simply learn more from you, is the best way to connect and follow you is on LinkedIn, or are there other
Yes,
venues?
absolutely. So on come and next to the follow, there's 3 dots, connect. I do sales tip of the day, as you
Mm,
know, and I just throw out all the things I've been learning over the years. It's all completely free. And then you're also welcome to drop me an email after you connect. You'll see my email address on my LinkedIn, not hard to find it. And I'm more than happy to just reply with a whole ton of sales resources. there was my offer to you. There was the bait on the hook. But guess what? After that, I am not going to try to reel you in, because I'm very selective with the clients I work with. I
Yeah.
like to work with clients that they're in it for the long haul, and they want to see success over the course of a 12-month period. So I'm just happy to help.
Yeah,
I've
that's great.
had a great career, and I'd love to help the industry just like you.
Well, you are one of the best, Steve. As someone who's a friend and have known you for years, you're just when I think sales development guru, seriously, I think of you. So thank you for sharing everything. You and for those of you who are listening, I highly recommend you follow Steve, learn from his wisdom, and I'll catch you in the next episode.